Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Rockus Blum Computer Consulting monthly webinar series. My name is Kelly Bergman, and I have the pleasure of introducing you to Greg Tisdale, our Sage 100 practice leader, and Jordan Smithers, our sales and solutions consultant for Sage Intacct. Today, we're going to be focusing on GL budgeting and some functionality you might find exciting as we approach the midway point of 2024. And as always, if you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A section or the chat section. We'll be monitoring them both, and we can either interrupt or we'll probably most likely answer them all at the end. With that, I'm going to let these two fine folks take it over.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Kelly. Much appreciated. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on GL budgeting. What we're going to do today is we're going to do a split between Jordan and myself. I'm going to start with Sage 100 and the budgeting process there, and then we're going to switch over to Jordan, and she's going to show you an Intacct. So what you can see from our agenda there, our budgeting goals is what we're going to talk about. We have the 100 demo, we have the Intacct demo, and then we will follow up and end with a Q&A.
So as Greg mentioned, initially, let's talk about some budgeting goals. So pretty high level here, right? But just being able to run comparative financials, seeing your actual versus budget. We'll obviously be able to show this to you in both of our softwares. This is easily doable and check yes. So then our next goal here is the ability to revise your budget mid-year. We all remember COVID, right? Probably needed to revise your budget then and pivot quite a bit. So having the ability to do that in either software as well. Being able to have insight into actual, right? So you're in your accounting software, whether that's Sage 100 or Sage Intacct, but just knowing that your data is there to support the actuals. And then having the ability to easily either import or hand key enter your budget. We all know Excel is an accountant's best friend, right? So you can leverage a template to import your budget into either software. Otherwise, you can also just hand key it, and we'll look at how we can do that in both softwares as well. So with that, I am actually going to turn it back over to Greg, and he is going to do a demo in Sage 100.
Thank you. All right, so let's start with, on the Sage 100 side, let's start with our budgeting process and our steps to lay out and define our various budgets. Now, similar to what Jordan said with regards to Intacct, Sage allows you to maintain multiple budgets. However, that being said, we can only have one default budget that we use, or we can only define one default budget, excuse me. So where do you set those up? So under General Ledger, under the General Ledger options, we have our tab 3 budget tab. And under the budget tab, we have the ability to add a up to 10 character budget code, a description. And as you can see, we can flag a default budget. However, we can only have one. So Sage out of the box will provide an original and revised budget. Those two selections cannot be deleted. They are system defined. However, you have, carte blanche after that to enter as many budgets as you like. So the budgets that you create on the fly or your own budgets can be deleted. And let me just accept that just to give you an example. Ours can be deleted. The revised and original cannot delete code revised. So just know that going forward. Here's where we define them. There's one other option here. So this copy actual to default budget at year end. This option will, during your year-end processing, copy your year-end actual balances to the default budget of the current year. So that only happens, it doesn't happen automatically. It happens during the year-end processing. But if you have this on, it will create this year's budgets from last year's actuals. All right, so let's talk about where do we maintain our budgets? Well, Typical to Sage, there's multiple places that we can maintain our budgets, and in each place there's a little bit of a different functional twist to it. So let's just open up directly in account maintenance in general ledger. You can see that we have a budget tab. But before I go over there, I just want to show you where our budgets show up. So on the variance tab in general ledger under the account maintenance, you'll see that we have a budget option, and here we can pick which budget we want to see in comparison to the year-to-date activity or each period's activity. So we can look at the original, we can look at the revised budget, we can even go back and look at previous year's activity. So that's one place we can see the budget. If we want to maintain that budget, I'll put that back to, I click on the budget button in the upper right, and I will open up budget maintenance. And here I can actually maintain. So I can make changes. I'm going to make that an even 22,000. So I can manually change the current budget, the original here, in this case, our default, our revised budget. I happen to also include this year's activity in the view, but I have control over this view by hitting on the select budgets button to the right here. I'll save my changes. And here's where I choose what I want to see in this grid. So if I want to add, let's see, next year budget for 2025, sorry. And so as you can see, I have no budget for next year, 2025, but I can add the column and then I can create the budget here. So when I'm working here, I'm literally just working on obviously the one GL account. The other buttons and options that I have here to the right is I can change my budget. So I have some options. I'm not going to explain each one, but I can create a copy from situation. I can change by percentage. You can see I can accumulate an amount, I can accumulate a percent, or I can put in the annual budget and then the system will divide it across all the various months. Typically though, when I'm working in this particular situation, I'm going to do the calculate wizard as opposed to do the previous option. The calculate wizard will just walk me through what I want to do. So let's say I'm going to create next year's budget. I want to do it for all periods. What am I going to base that on? Well, let's base it on this year's activity, next year's revised, next year, all the various budgets that I have already set up. So I'm going to do it on the revised budget. Next. And then I have some options. Do I want to copy the source budget so it'll copy it as is? Do I want to copy and adjust by a percentage? Or do I want to copy it and adjust by an amount? So let's say I'm going to up it by a percentage and I'm going to increase it by 15%. Okay, so you can see I've created my 2025 next year budget, which really should be 2026, but you can see that we have taken what we had for our 2025, marked it up by, or increased it by a percentage of 15% and created next year's budget. So this enables me to work on a account by account basis. However, if I wanted to do a larger grouping, I have a mechanism for doing that as well. And I also want to show you that I could literally move through accounts. Even though I'm in the account 990-00-00, I can navigate to other accounts and edit them there. So it's just something to be careful of. So let's cancel this. Let's close out of here. Let's accept that. So that's one of our first options for creating and maintaining. Now, of course, it's fairly manual, this process. If we want to do a larger grouping or range, we can use budget revision entry. And I'm going to open this up. And you can see that I've opened up and I already have a selection. So here, what this allows me to do is I can use my selection that I've already opened, and I can add additional accounts to this. So I can append, if I wanted to see COGS accounts, I could add those. Or I could say, oh, this was something I'm done working on. This shouldn't be here. I'm going to clear it out. So in order to do that, I can hit on my selection button here. So this will allow me to pick and choose my new accounts. I'm going to hit this clear button on the bottom left. It will clear the existing selection. I want to say yes. I'm going to proceed. And you can see I have cleared my selection. And now I can start again. Not sure why that. Let me just close out and reopen that. Okay. See if that'll straighten out that screen. So here I have the ability to pick a selection. Now I can do some revisions at this point in time. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to pick a range of accounts that I want to work on at this moment. So let me pick my revenue accounts. So I'll start with my 01. And I'll go down to my returns. So I'm going to select this as my range. I'm going to proceed. And now you can see I'm back to that selection that we had when we originally went in. So here I can individually, column by column, field by field, update. So I can come in, manually type something in here. Oh, there. If I don't like what I did, I can reset it. It'll just put it back. So I can reset the current field, or I can reset an entire row. But what I would like to also show you here is I can pick another selection. So if I want to add to this, so let's pick something. We'll just add freight. Just to show you that you can append to the existing lookup that we have. And now I've added those three freight charges to my selection. Okay. And not sure why my screen is fighting me. There we go. So I can manually enter and change. I can also use the functions we looked at earlier where we can change our budget. So we can copy amounts similar to what we saw in the tools earlier when we were looking at it account by account. Okay. Sorry, I'm missing an icon, but I also have that same, I'm missing an icon to do a group change. So what I'm going to do though is show you. So one of the things I think is beneficial in this particular view is the ability to export it. So I may not want to work on this manually. I may want to take this data, export it to Excel, and I want to manipulate it there. So I have a really easy process to do that in order to get that out. I simply, in Sage, this is common in most of the views where you have a grid, you can right click and export that grid to Excel. And grab that and you can bring that over. So this is a simple way for me to get data out. Here, now that it's in Excel, I can manipulate it. I can create some formulas, some algorithms that I want to use that will do changes to the calculations that are not just straight percentage, increases and decreases that are flat. So we can do some work, we can manipulate it, we can save it, and then we can import it back into Sage 100. Now, I have two options when it comes to importing. So I can import through Visual Integrator, which is our usual import tool, or I can import through GL Exchange, which is built into General Ledger utilities to allow me to import. So we have two options. I'm going to we'll touch on both before we end up our part of the session and show you how that works. But again, I think that probably exporting data out, manipulating and importing is the most efficient way to get your budgets in, but want you to know that, want you to know that there's multiple ways that you can go about this. So we can do it as a group, we can do it individually, update general ledger accounts individually, or we can do imports. So I'm going to close out of here. Now, if I had made changes, I do have a budget revision register that will post and update those changes. So there is a posting process to that. We didn't make any changes there, so I'm not going to go through that process, but I want to know there is an update. There's no dollars that update because it's just the budgets, but it is a update process nonetheless. So where can we use budget? So obviously we looked, you can see it in the account maintenance. And so you can see your budget when you're looking at your actuals and see what your variances are to that budget. But you can also add it to your financial reports and you can add it to other reports. You can also use it in Sage Intelligence reporting. So let's go ahead. Now I happen to have an income statement in here that I did add the budget to. So I'm just going to go ahead and run that. And we can take a look at that and then I'll show you just how we can do that on the fly. So we're just going to look at the income statement with budget. And I'm going to run it. Our fiscal year and the demo data is 2025. We only have data through May, so we're going to stop there. And I don't think I have the selection on and I don't have trends set up for this report. So let's just go ahead and preview it. And as you can see now, I have my period to date, my budgeted information, my year to date against my budgeted totals. So, quick and easy way or simple way to just add your budgets. You pick and choose which budget you want to see. So it could be your original, could be your revised, could be your next year. You decide when you create the report. So let's take a look at that. Let's go back in. We'll create a new financial report. We'll go through this relatively quick. And I will say we'll do one for revised. We'll do it again, an income statement. I'm just going to add revised, just a little more definition there. If I had account groups or report groups, I could add this to certain different report groups. I only have the standard in the demo data, so I'm just going to leave that as is. What type of report? I'm going to do a combined statement. What do I want to see in the data? So how do I want the output to look? I have some options here. I'll pick the first one for time's sake. So I'm going to do this be actual, the budget, the variance, and a percentage. And then I can choose, do I want period to date, year to date? Both. I'm going to take both. How do I want my numeric values to show? I can change that. Do I want to print $0 balances? Or also, do I want to add my account numbers, which I do? And which budget do I want to see my revised? Next, footnotes if I need to. Here, I can turn it on so that we can give the option for users to run ranges. So we could use runtime ranges. We'd check that box, and then all these options would be available when the user prints the report. And I'm just going to have it pop up. We're going to run it through May again. And here we are. So basically the same thing we saw earlier, but with the revised budget versus the original. And I close out of that. And the last two things I'd like to just touch on is importing, because I do think that this is the most efficient way to get the data into Sage. So this particular first option we're going to look at is the VI import. So I have a visual integrator import out here that I created. Now, this is something that if you are not comfortable doing, this is something that you certainly can reach out to your consultant and they can help you set this. They can do it or help you in setting up your import. And once it's set up, it's there to run forever. And import, a VI import, works against all companies. So I do happen to have an import here. Here are the fields that I have in this import. It's working off a spreadsheet. It's the exact spreadsheet that I exported out earlier. It's a copy of it. So I wanted to do that because I wanted you to see that or know that what I export out of Sage, I can then manipulate and just bring it back in and basically the same format. The only thing is I save it as a CSV. So I'll just show you, we'll do a quick run on this. I happen to have a couple of fields in here that are runtime. So I'm going to put this for 2025. And this is revise. So what I'm doing is just giving it a fiscal year and what budget am I going to update. Let's test this. And it's just telling me that, yes, all those records will import. Tells me that they passed. And now I know I have a good import. I can import into the Sage. Where is it going to go? It's going to import into the budget revision entry. So you can go in, look at it. You can manipulate it even more. And then you can use the register to post it. And then the other option is to use General Ledger Exchange. And basically, it's the same methodology. We're going to map an import, a CSV file into Sage 100. So the Exchange is just another variation of the VI import. And that's pretty much concludes what I would like to demonstrate today. I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to Jordan.
Greg, if you could confirm that you can see my webinar.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Look, I can see. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so kind of pivoting, but still talking about GL budget. So this is Sage Intacct. I have my instance set to default on a dashboard specific to the controller. And one thing I just wanted to make mention before I dive too deep in is any of the reports that we're going to look at today, which there will be a few, can be pinned to a dashboard. So for example, you can see in the middle of my screen here, I have my profit and loss statement with actual versus budget. So just kind of a quick win for today's GL budgeting topic, that I can pin, any of the reports, but specifically this P&L actual versus budget to any of my dashboards. So let's take a look at a couple of other reports. Actually, I'm going to show this P&L first, and see and understand what Sage Intacct can do as far as budgeting goes, and then going to kind of end the same way that Greg did by showing you how to get it into the software. So I have a couple different reports here. Like I said, the first one I'm going to show you is this profit and loss actual versus budget. I'm backdating this, but you can run it, as of today. You could filter by a specific department and location on this report. I'll talk a little bit more about this on a few other reports, but I'm just going to click view, and this brings this report up right on my screen here, right? So I'm able to see, obviously on my GL accounts down the left-hand side here, and then I've got my actual I've got my budget that I've imported, and then I've got two calculated columns here. I've got a budget difference and a budget variance. And in my variance, it's a percentage column, but I've also put some conditional formatting in here. I personally really like this on any report, but here especially because it helps me draw my eyes to, where am I way over my budget, or where am I sitting good? I could spend some more, right? So it's just kind of a nice little visual indicator here. You can print this report, export it to Excel, email it as well. So if somebody, wanted to see those numbers and all of that there as well. I'll also just make mention that any of the numbers in blue you can drill down into. So if I wanted to see, the $900,000 that makes up my commercial revenue actual, I could drill into that just by clicking the blue numbers there, and it takes me to a GL report specific to that account. That's on the actuals. So again, kind of one of our pain points that we had mentioned there, our goals that we want to solve is, you're in your accounting system being able to see where those actuals come from. Okay. I am gonna, the Zoom controls are right where I want to be. So here we go. Show you one other report here. It's still our budget versus actual, but it's going to be in a graphical view. So it's just kind of a fun way to look at your data. I like how the bars kind of give us that visual ooh, effect, right? But this is just showing me my budget versus actual. So my actuals in the lime green color and my budget in my teal color here. And I'm able just to see kind of a visual snapshot. Ooh, February, we were really close, right? What's happening there. And you can see the actual dollar amounts as well down here, displayed in a grid. So just kind of a fun take on seeing your data, right? Just showing capabilities of what we can do and what you can generate out of Sage Intacct. And in Sage Intacct, I can also budget by dimension. So I'm going to leverage a different environment here, but it's all the same. But first, what is a dimension? So in Sage Intacct, we break that segmented chart of account thought process and leverage a natural account number with optional dimensions on the back side of it. So what is a dimension? A location, a department, a class, customer, vendor, employee, item. Those are all standard dimensions. So I could budget by vendor if I wanted to, if I needed to really hone in on my spending, maybe even I have a minimum spend requirement with a vendor. I could put that in as a budget and then compare all of my expenditures against that vendor to the budget or the minimum spend requirement that I need to have. So just different unique ways that you can leverage the software in that aspect. I'm first going to run this statement of functional expenses, actual versus budget. And this report is going to show me all of my different departments across the top here. Click OK to run it. And it's showing me that. So for example, counseling services is a department, food service is a department, fundraising is a department. These are just examples. You may have departments like admin or marketing or sales. You could use department for a number of different things, whatever makes sense for you, product line or not so much product line, but maybe cost center or something like that. But what I'm really honing in on here is that you can budget by department. So I've got my different expenditure account groups here. I can also break down and see the detail of what GL accounts are making up this group. And I have it displaying the name, not the account number, but that's just a preference here, right? So I'm able to see for my salaries, my actual for my counseling services compared to my budget for specifically my counseling services salaries. And then I could go to my food service salaries and my fundraising salaries, etc. So it's just allowing you to really slice and dice your budgeting to your specific dimensions, whether that's department, class, like I mentioned, vendor, item, etc. There's another way that we can look at that too. So here I'm going to run, which one do I want here? I think I want my project actual versus budget here. Yes. So in this Sage Intacct instance, I have projects as another dimension. And so I'm specific to a nonprofit, but you may have internal projects like a new ERP implementation that you want to track different costs against that project. In this scenario, I'm tracking both my billings against my project. So I have a budget specific to billings, and then I also have a budget specific to costs. So in Sage Intacct, I can have many budgets, and I can have just a standard overall operating budget, which is what we saw before, but I can also budget to a specific project and have multiple different budgets against each of my individual projects. So here again, all of my projects, my billing budget. So what am I billing out against all of these projects? Probably have some, revenue goals essentially there. And then what are my costs associated with each of these projects as well? And then I've got my actual and difference as well too. So you can see revenue, expenses, and we've got those there. So just showing, really the power of what I can do and how I can report on the different budgets that I have set up in the system. So just like we saw elsewhere, so I've got all of these different modules in Sage Intacct, but I have one specific to budgets. And here I've got my I could run some reports, which we'll look at in a little bit too here, but I have my budget repository. And so this is showing me a list of all of the different budgets that I have set up in Sage Intacct right now. So again, just like in 100, you can have one default budget, right? But you can have many other budgets. I usually just continue to import each year into my operating budget. So I don't create, a 2024 budget and a 2025 budget and a et cetera, et cetera. But within my operating budget, I'm able to see all years worth of budgets here. So I can also take this and export it. And we're going to look at the import here in just a moment as well. So I can import my budgets too. But from here, I can look at the details of my operating budget. And so I'm seeing a list of all of my specific GL account and dimension relationships and which have a budget set up against it. I'm going to choose the second one in my list here to see this specific, budget for this GL account and so forth there. So when I look at this, just like we saw before, I could drill into this specific GL account number with these specific dimension relationships and set my budget for a specific period or periods here. So I could put in, a range of all of my 2021, or I could come to current year or future years. I could calculate it here to what am I going to calculate it based on? My budget, I've got an employee count. If I'm tracking that in a statistical account, you can leverage your statistical accounts, which are non-financial accounts, to help calculate your budget as well. Or do I want to calculate it on actuals? So just like we had seen, I can take all of my last year's numbers and push them to this year's quote unquote budget. So I could calculate it on actuals. I could pick a specific period and say I want it to be, that specific period's actuals. I could also then choose to grow it. So maybe if I'm going to do it, based on last year's budget, maybe not last year's actuals, but last year's budget, and I want to grow it by 5%, or I could grow it by $1,500 or whatever makes sense. You can type in that number and then let's just say 5%, and I can then compute it and it would update that accordingly there. Okay. So just know, and that's again on a one-by-one basis, right? And so I'm going into each individual account and dimension relationship and updating it there. Probably a little cumbersome, right? But if you need to do a one-off, know that that's, doable in that sense there. However, I can also import my budget. So I'm going to pull up an Excel file here that I had filled out. I just have a few records on here. So out of Sage Intacct, you can grab a template. So maybe we show that here. So I'm going to go company and import data, and I'm going to find my budgets, which are listed right here. And so I've got just a specific, I could create it, I could import it from here, or I can grab a template. And this template will, open an Excel file, and it's going to show me all of the different fields that I can choose to import on my budget. So I'll have a specific budget ID, an account number, and then I've got all of my different dimensions that I can tag here as well. And then with each period, I would say January, February, March, April, May, etc., and plug in all of my budget information here. So probably what happens most often is you're going to maybe export last year's numbers or last year's budget, distribute it accordingly, and then you will come and put it all back in the template and import that template into Sage Intacct for your next year's budget. So for example, here's what I have just filled out a little bit. So I've got my specific GL account number. I've got a group. It's the same one over and over, but I have different dimension combinations here. So this one's really budgeting by project to a specific department, location, and item site here. Okay, and then I've got my dollar amounts, and I've got one other GL account here just for show. And what I can then do is, I'm not going to save this, I don't know what I changed, but then I can come right into my budget repository and I can say, let's import a file here. And all of my data was just for January 2022. So I go and I navigate, I find that CSV file, it does have to be CSV, and you choose that file and you say import. And it's going to say data import and process, and I'm going to get an email notification once that file is done importing. And it usually happens pretty quick. I don't have my email open here because I didn't want to be distracted, but let's take a look, and it should be in here. So I'm going to run a budget report, and all of my data was just for a specific period. So I'm going to pick, and it was just for January of 2022. So I can hone in on, I know I only imported that, but you could also do a range. If I did all of 2022, I could say January through December, for example. I could choose to filter this out any other way, but I'm just going to say, show me January 2022's budget for my specific operating budget, and I'm going to say view on my screen here, and there we have it. So these were those same, and I have a couple other in here too, but these were those same account and dimension relationships that we had on our Excel file, and those dollar amounts are now all updated in this specific budget. So again, for example, if I wanted to run, last year's operating budget, I could say, and let's assume I'm in 2021 or 2022 now, and I want to see all of last year's operating budget. I select those periods and say view on my screen, and I've got all of that here. So I'm seeing that specific GL account, number and name, and I've got my dimensions here. So I'm seeing fund, department, project, and my department name and number are separate, but I could probably slide those two columns together. I see the total, and then I see it broken out by period as well. And again, I could print this if I need to go into a meeting and have a paper copy. I can print it. I could email it to my, CFO for review or something like that, or I can export it to Excel or CSV as well. So I can export that. It's going to give me a very similar looking output before. I'm going to trust this file. My font's really small, but you can see here that I've got a list of all of my GL account and dimension combinations here. and all of the different periods across the side there too. So you're able to export that. Maybe this again was last year's budget, not necessarily actual, but where you could start for budgeting for next year. You could break this out by, a specific department, give your fundraising department head the responsibility for budgeting to those, and your counseling services department head the responsibility to budget to those specific GL accounts. Back into Sage Intacct just to kind of wrap it all up, and then see what else we have here. Reminder again, I can have multiple different budgets set up here. So we were looking at our operating budget, but I could budget to a specific project or create that billing budget versus costing budget. And again, I can set any of those reports that we saw before on a specific dashboard. So this is a different dashboard that I've got here. Let's see if my controller has a budget on here. I don't know if I do or not, but I can pop back over here and wrap up our Sage Intacct session 2 here. So again, controller dashboard, and this I have my profit and loss actual versus budget here, but any of those other reports that we saw as well, that project-based budget report, or my expenditures and so forth. So all of those could be pinned on your dashboard, and you can quick and easy match your actual to budget. I'm going to bring up our PowerPoint. So we did our demo. And I'm going to pause, Kelly, if we have any questions. I didn't see anything come through, but maybe you did.
Nope, no questions on my end.
Awesome. So just one last thing to note, that both in Sage 100 and Sage Intacct, there are add-on modules, whether that's through Sage Direct or third party. If you're looking for more, I'm going to say maybe like what if scenarios and those kinds of budgeting related features and functionalities, there are solutions out there. Not, obviously natively, but you can do your what if in Excel, import it back into 100 or Intacct, all of that. But if you want that more robust features and functionality, reach out to either Greg or myself. I've got our contact information on the screen here. And I want to just say thank you. And I will hand it back over to Kelly to wrap up with any other housekeeping tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. So reach out to either of these guys or your trusted Sage consultant. If you have any other questions, we're always here and happy to answer them for you. And I'd like to thank Greg and Jordan for their time today. And of course, all of you who attended. We know your time is valuable, and we sure do appreciate you spending an hour of it with us, or 45 minutes as it looks like here. If you'd like to learn more about this topic, again, reach out. With that, thank you so much, and we hope to see you at the next one.